Thank you for watching the video. My name is Alan Liska, and I'm the owner of Green Archer Comics. If you're a regular fan of this channel, this video is a little different than the kind that we normally do. We normally talk about comics, Golden Age comics, modern comics. We especially love talking about indie comics as well as our own comics. We make comics that revive pulp legends, and we've had some success with that. But a big part of our strategy is Kickstarter. So since 2023, we've run eight stick Kickstarter campaigns and made a little over $30,000 from those eight campaigns. All campaigns have been successfully funded, and more importantly, all campaigns have been successfully fulfilled. And that's what I want to talk about today is, as the title said, 5 strategies for launching a successful comic Kickstarter in 2025. Because the indie comics landscape has changed, it continues to be evolving, but so are a lot of the avenues that we use to create and get the word out about our Kickstarter campaigns. Social media landscape has changed. The Kickstarter itself has changed. And so we're going to talk about what we see and what works and what doesn't work. I'm going to tell you up front, this is not one of those videos where I'm going to tell you how guaranteed that you'll get a 5-figure or 6-figure Kickstarter or anything like that. In fact, that's not our strategy at all. We do Kickstarters for individual comics, and we make a few $1,000s on each one. But it's a sustainable model and allows us to build as we continue to grow our audience. And so if you are an indie comic creator and you're thinking about launching a Kickstarter for your comic, hopefully some of these tips will be helpful to you. But if you have any questions, comment below, send me an email, reach out on social media. I'm happy to help in any way that I can. The indie comics community is amazing, and there are so many cool and wonderful things being done. And I want to help a little bit to get more people into this really vibrant and cool community. So my 5 tips are: make your comic, set a realistic funding goal, realize that followers don't equal backers, promote, but don't be an ass, and don't get scammed. So I'm going to start with number 1, make a comic. And that is harder than it sounds, right? A lot of us have had the idea forever, oh, I'd love to do a comic, I'd love to do it, but actually getting out and making the comic is hard. And it's a little harder now than it used to be. If you go back to 2017, 2018, you could sometimes get away with starting a Kickstarter with the concept of a comic. And people would back it, you'd be successful, and then you'd have 6 months or whatever to make the comic. That really doesn't work anymore. You need to have your comic mostly finished before you launch your Kickstarter. And I know that's frustrating, right? Because most of us want to use the money from the Kickstarter campaign to make the comic, to pay the artist if we're not doing the art, or pay the writers, or pay the editors, pay for printing, pay the letterers, the copy editors. There's a lot of components involved in making a comic, and making a comic can be expensive. But the truth is that most of the comics Kickstarter campaigns that I see fail don't really have a comic. They have a shell of a comic. They have an idea. They may have some cool covers, but they don't have a comic. They can't tell you about the basics of what their comic is going to be. And I highly recommend, and I'll put the link in the description, checking out Kevin Laporte's Substack, where he talks about new comic campaigns and kind of rates them and looks at them. And he's got some really good points. And one of the things that you need to keep in mind for people like Kevin and myself, because I am considered a super backer on Kickstarter. I've backed more than 350 comics projects over the last way too long. Um, and so I'm telling you, not just as a creator, but somebody who wants to back your comic, I need more. I need finished pages. I can I can survive without lettering, but I need finished pages so that I know that you actually are serious about making a comic. And I need to know things like, hey, how big is your comic? Is this a 32-page comic, a 20-page comic, a 120-page comic? I need to know that you've thought this through and you know what you're getting into because that is going to be a big determiner of whether or not I choose to back your comic. And it's hard enough. At any given time, there are hundreds of comics Kickstarter projects that people can choose from. And it's hard enough to get noticed and to get attention. But if you don't have the basics, if you don't have finished pages, you don't have a great cover, and you don't have an idea of what and how you're doing and what your timeline is, if I don't feel comfortable reading that, I'm going to skip over you, and a lot of other people are. So make as much of your comic as you can before you start your Kickstarter. And then set a realistic funding goal. Another challenge that I see, and this ties right into comics being expensive. I know how much it costs us to make a comic. But if you're a first-time comic creator and you don't have a large audience that you're bringing in from somewhere else, if you set a funding goal of $10,000, you are very unlikely to hit that. Even if that is what it's going to cost you to make your comic. And hopefully it doesn't cost you to make that much to make your comic. But even if that is what it's going to cost you, $10,000 is not a realistic goal. And I know we see it all the time. We see five-figure, six-figure comics all the time, but that's a survivorship bias. That is people who have had success, and so they get that attention and so on. Most comics projects don't fund anywhere near the five figures. So keep that in mind when you're setting your funding goal. You obviously want to be able to make your money back, but you need to do it in a way that is also going to be realistic for you to hit your funding goal. And keep in mind that when you set up your comics project, your funding goal includes not just the cost of the comics, but the cost of the shipping. So for many providers, ourselves included, a physical copy of the comic is $10 and shipping is $5 or $6 in the US. If it's the rest of the world, it gets more expensive. Or if you're coming from like the UK or Ireland or something, shipping to the US can be really expensive. And so you're going to include that when you're setting your pricing. So you're going to say, when you go to set up your campaign, all right, my physical copy is $10 and I'm going to charge $5 for shipping, $6 for shipping, $7 for shipping, whatever you're going to charge. And you can make changes based on where it's being shipped to in the world. But that all goes to your funding goal. So let's say you need to make $3,000 to cover the cost of making the comic itself. Well, about 20% of your cost, if not more, is going to be paid out in shipping. So but all of that is collected total. So if I pledge $16 to back your campaign, that goes to your $3,000 total, even though likely six of that is what your shipping cost is going to be. So keep that in mind when you're setting your funding goal, that you need to be about 20% over to make sure you're covering shipping costs. So again, set a realistic goal. And this goes back to making your comic. Think about how you can make the comic as economically as possible. Maybe you can make the comic in black and white instead of color. I love a good black and white comic. Now, you might not like that. That might be you're making an epic superhero comic and all in color may be what you want, But even if you look at something like Matt Schofield's recent Steamroller Man, that is a beautifully drawn, well executed comic, and the interiors are black and white. So even the comics that maybe you might traditionally think of as color only comics, you can do in black and white, and that may save you some money. So think about that as you're going through the process. Now, if you're an artist and you can make everything yourself and you can write the story yourself, and so it's only your money, that gets a little bit easier. Well, I should say your time and your investment, that gets a little bit easier and you can make that back. But keep in mind when you're setting your funding goal that that funding goal includes shipping. Number three is followers don't equal backers. We made that mistake with our first comic. I had at the time about 12,000 followers on Twitter, and I thought, great, even if 1% of those back this campaign, will blow the number away. And we actually did. We did really well in our first campaign, but we only got about 80, I think 84 backers. So less than 1%. And honestly, most of the backers did not come from Twitter. Most of the backers came, in fact, only a handful really came from Twitter. Most of the backers came from people I knew, people that I developed relationships with. And part of that is if you're known for one thing, the sudden pivot to doing comics doesn't necessarily track. The people who are following you for the one thing don't necessarily want your comic or care about your comic. Now, it's maybe a little bit different if you have a lot of followers or a lot of connections as an artist. But even then, there's no guarantee that because somebody likes your art, they'll want to back your comic. So do not count on your followers necessarily converting to backers. You may need a new set of followers. You may need to attract a new group of followers, but don't count on them. Say, oh, I have 3,000 followers on Instagram, so obviously they will all back my comic. There's a pretty good chance they won't, and that they're just not interested in your comic. Now, there are ways to cultivate that community, and that's where the pre-launch page becomes really important. So get everything together as quickly as possible. And once you have it all submitted to Kickstarter, so you'll need to have a page about it, have your rewards set up, give them your financial information, and then there'll be a 3 or 4 day approval process. After your project is approved, you can set up a pre-launch page where you can get people to say, yeah, you know what? I'm happy to support that project. I'm excited for this project. And the more you get in there, the more that juices the Kickstarter algorithm. So, and that'll also help you test how many of your followers will convert to backers. But also, reach out to your friends, reach out to your family, reach out to everybody. These are people who care about you. They want to see you succeed in this project. So make sure you're reaching out to your network of friends and family and telling them, hey, I'm doing this, I'm doing something new, I'm really excited about it. I'd really appreciate it if you'd pledge to back. And if you can leave that pre-launch page up for 30 days before you actually launch your campaign, that'll allow you to gather lots of people. So on day one, you'll be able to maybe go out and go a long way toward hitting your funding goal because that also helps juice the Kickstarter algorithm. The more people who have pledged to back your campaign, the higher your campaign is ranked. And that can help you with things like maybe you'll get a project we love, which is a special designation that Kickstarter gives. It's their comics editorial that says, yeah, this is kind of a cool thing and we really, really want to endorse it. It's no guarantee, but a project we love gets you higher in the search rankings. Having more activity gets you higher in the search rankings. So if you set a $3,000 goal and on your first day you get halfway there, that's going to do a lot to help accelerate your search rankings within the Kickstarter algorithm. So don't count on followers, do count on friends and family, at least at the beginning, once people see that you've had some success, oh, we're 50% funded on our first day, then you can start reaching out to other people and say, hey, look, this is what we're doing. I mean, absolutely, as you're making the comic, talk about the comic on Instagram or Blue Sky or Substack or wherever you're doing this. Absolutely talk about it. Absolutely try and get people excited for it. Just know that if they know you for one thing, they may not know you. They may not want to follow you for this, but hopefully by doing that, you can attract new followers that want to, connect with you and back your Kickstarter campaign. And find other communities. There are plenty of indie comics communities that are supportive and helpful of each other on Reddit, on Facebook. There are Discord communities, there are Slack communities, there are all of these different indie comics communities. And join those, participate in those, be a part of those communities, which goes to my tip number 4, promote, but don't be an ass. You have to promote your comic. And if you're like us, I don't like doing that. It's the part of it I hate the most. I wish I could hire somebody who would do the promotion, but you have to. You have to tell people about your comic. I mean, you're proud of it, right? You're excited for it. You want people to back you, and you want to get this into people's hands because you did something really cool. It still can feel uncomfortable for a lot of people to promote. So don't be afraid to promote your comic, to tell people about your comic. But that can't be the only thing you do, especially if you start joining other indie comics communities. I've seen a number of Facebook groups that are indie comic communities that it's literally just person after person promoting their indie comic. There's no community there. There's no real community. There's no people encouraging each other. There's no people helping each other, offering advice, etc. That's useless. Nobody is going to want to back your comic from those communities. That's why connecting with those people, offering real advice. Maybe you know a lot about Adobe and people have Adobe questions and you can answer those questions. You know a lot about printing. You can answer printing questions. You know a lot about lettering. There are a lot of different things that you can do to help and be part of those communities. Be part of those communities, and then when you promote your comic, they are much more likely to support you. And that includes back other indie creators. So many times you'll see a new creator come in, they set up their Kickstarter, and you can see that this is their first project and they've backed no other projects on Kickstarter. That just doesn't feel right. It's a running joke in the indie comic community that basically we're all passing around the same $20. Um, and to some extent, that's true. Like, I support a lot of indie comics creators, and some of those creators come back and support me, and that's great. And you don't have to support every indie comic creator out there. You don't have to, because that would get super expensive. But being part of that community means that you're an actual asset to the community, but then you don't mind promoting. And same thing on your social medias. Again, whether it's Instagram or Blue Sky or wherever your social media that you're comfortable with, feel free to promote your comic there. Don't just promote your comic there, but absolutely, and I can't tell you how often to do it because it depends on the person and what other content you're posting, etc. But, it's not going to annoy people if you even make daily posts or sometimes twice a day posts about your Kickstarter campaign while it's running. Because most of the time they won't see it, which is the other problem, right? You're at the mercy of the algorithm of whatever social media platform you're using. And we know things like Instagram downplays links, which is why everybody uses the annoying link in bio. But, what choice do you have? Blue Sky doesn't. But if there's a lot of activity, if you're being followed by a lot of people who are also following a lot of other people, your post is going to slowly disappear. So whatever your social media platform is, don't be afraid to post multiple times about your campaign because it's likely that it's not being seen by most of the people who are connected to you on that platform. but don't just post about it. It can't be the only thing you talk about for 30 days. It may feel like it to you, but it can't feel like it to everybody else. And then finally, don't get scammed. When you post your Kickstarter, you are almost instantaneously going to get a half dozen messages on Kickstarter from people who are offering to promote your campaign. They will likely find you on Instagram and hit you up there too. I've had people hit me on LinkedIn. I've had people hit me on Twitter. I've had people email me and say, "Oh, I see you have a Kickstarter campaign. Let me help you promote your Kickstarter campaign." And this it works roughly the same. We're going to send an email out to, 300 super backers and, for 25 or 50 or $100. And super backers are more likely to back your project. Like I said in the beginning, I am a super backer. I've backed more than 350 comics. I ignore all of those emails. They just go into spam. If they somehow manage to get through spam, I delete them without even looking at them. They do not work. There are some ways that you can effectively promote. I would take a look at Tyler's Comics Launch program. He has some really cool free videos and posts about ways that you can do like Facebook ads and things like that, if that's something you want to do. But do not waste your money with these scammers. And I know it's going to be very tempting. You get halfway through the campaign and you hit that dead spot. And that is the reality of Kickstarter. If you've done everything correctly, you're going to have a fantastic start. In the first 3 or 4 days are going to zoom along and you're going to get closer and closer to your number. And then if you have a typical 30-day campaign, you're going to have a week or more where you may not get any new backers. Like that's just the dead spot of a Kickstarter campaign. And that's the reality for almost every campaign. You may get a backer here and there and so on, but your growth is going to slow dramatically and you're going to maybe go into panic mode. Do not let, and that's what they're preying on, right? That's what these scammers are preying on, is that you're in panic mode and you're not fully paying attention. You're not fully thinking through what they're offering you. So don't get scammed. And that's it. Those are kind of my 5 tips for launching your Kickstarter comic in 2025. If you decide to go ahead, tell me about it. I want to hear about it. I want to know about your campaign. And, I'd love to be able to share it out because we need more people in the indie comics community, and we need more people like you making indie comics. So if you've got a campaign going or you're thinking about doing a campaign or you have questions, you can hit me up in the comments. You can send me an email. Find me on Blue Sky. I am more than happy to answer any and all questions and help in any way that I can. And good luck to you. I hope you have wild success with your campaign.